Today we will visit the smallest spot the Cyclops ever set foot on. It is such a small place that, only by coincidence, anyone knows of it. And probably because of that, there is hardly any video footage to show them. So, unfortunately, we will mostly have to rely on photographs of the locale. This lack of footage makes a sharp contrast to other ancient sites with Cyclopean walls that are, more often than not, major capitals of full-blown empires, turned into tourist magnets, such as Athens, Mycenae, Cusco, Alatri, and also in contrast with those famous cities with their complicated and aristocratic histories and myths. Today's Cyclopean destination offers us but a single word about its past, only some silent stones, alluding to the most tantalizing events in our deep past. Let's then dive into the island of Pantelleria. Pantelleria is a small volcanic island sitting in the continental divide between Africa and Europe, bang in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Today, Pantelleria is part of the country of Italy, but the short distance into Tunisia, actually closer than to Sicily, meant the island was, at times, more disputed than worth it, by the many disagreeing sides of the Mediterranean pond. In fact, for most of its history, starting with the arrival of the Carthaginian to establish the first city named Corcyra in the 7th century BC, up until World War II, and even today with the migrating crisis, Pantelleria has been a mere stepping stone between Northern Africa and Southern Europe. On the other hand, before all that, during prehistory, the island might have been a true protagonist, because it sat at the heart of the first ever global trade network, thanks to its rich obsidian deposits, a volcanic glass that, in the Neolithic, made up for some fine cutlery, and found its way from Pantelleria up to mainland Europe. Plus, yes, there were also Cyclops in the island, the authors of a unique type of construction named locally Sessi, which are deservedly the main focus for this video. Considering the brief history and even less detailed prehistory of Pantelleria, we will spice it up with some ancient coincidences from the other small islands scattered around this submerged Africa-Europe pathway. There are but a few of those islands, and the ones with significant prehistory remains make up for a colorful bunch, adding each one its particular character to the story, like a crew assembled to do a heist movie. So let's meet not the Ocean's 11, but the Cyclopean Seas 12 or 13. Too big for this group are Malta and Gozo, where Cyclopean construction was booming since the 4th millennium BC. But since I recently made a video about them, I'll skip them this time. Then there's Ustica, to the north of Sicily, featuring some unpractical and misunderstood stone graves that are worth mentioning. Also to the north side of Sicily, we can find the 7 Aeolian Islands, that are proeminently covered in ancient stories. And lastly, the islands of Lampedusa and Lenosa, a collective named the Pelagian Islands, which is a word that should ring a bell. As we've seen, Pelagian is the archipelago of those L-named islands. And if the word sounds familiar, it is probably because it is just a letter S or sigma away from being Pelasgian. Now, before dismissing this as just a coincidence, the type of stuff academics see everywhere, we'd better check these two words' origin. The Pelagian Islands are named from the Greek word pelagos, meaning, to this day, sea, whilst Pelasgian is a word obscure in its origin, often used by classical Greek scholars to refer to the pre-Hellenic inhabitants of Greece and Italy, some mysterious folks that had the habit of building Cyclopean walls. So much so, those walls were sometimes called Pelasgian walls. This name coincidence would be too big to ignore if we could find Cyclopean walls in those Hell Islands. However, in Lampedusa, there are only a couple of stone circles, very badly kept, up to a point it is hard to devise why they were even built for. These old stones could be either a very large hut or a too small archaeological clock. Either way, they are fixing the time of the island inhabitant to the early Bronze Age, or right about the correct epoch for Pelasgian and Cyclopean stuff. There are two types of Cyclops in ancient sources. One is the one-eyed giant of myths and plays, whilst the other are the round-eyed builders of Cyclopean walls. They are so different that even the authors of those sources do not mingle, with Virgil and Homer mentioning only the mythical beasts, whilst Pausanias and Strabo were, like me, into the wall-building types. Right now, after thousands of years, it is hard to know whether these two types of Cyclops had one same origin that diverged in meaning, or are just a coincidence of a word used to describe two different things. This coincidence in name could be solved by the Aeolian Islands to the north of Sicily, a group of 7 old volcanoes, one of them not yet extinct, and another one literally called volcano. The Aeolian Islands are often featured in the fantastic stories and myths of the one-eyed giants, including the most famous of them all, that one with Ulysses blinding a Cyclops to escape an island prison, with the island in the story being most likely one of the Aeolians. On the other hand, in those islands there are no signs of the Cyclopean types that build walls, either because the Cyclops beasts and the Cyclops builders are really unrelated, or because the Indo-European invasions around 1200 BC destroyed everything in the island, which they did. Truly Cyclopean are the oldest stone buildings to be found in Pantelleria. They are called sesi, and a few dozens are still around to be visited today. In essence, these sesi are some rough-piled dry stone mounds, meaning no mortar was used to secure the stones. A construction technique that could be called Cyclopean, but not polygonal. Although their main usage is said to be for hiding dead bodies, I could not confirm if any original body was ever found inside, and even less if carbon date testing was done on it. They are dated to the Bronze Age, around 2000 BC, a popular timing for Cyclopean construction in all the Mediterranean basin, so we have no reason to suspect that timing. The most interesting aspect of the sesi is the name origin, that is attributed to the Old Iberian language from the Iberian Peninsula and a non-Indo-European language, thus placing these constructions as part of those old interlinked cultures that would cover the Mediterranean Sea and build Cyclopean walls deep in the Bronze Age. The shapes and size of the sezi are quite varied, with a few different approaches to fitting up these burial sites. However, there's one sezi that stands out above all others, for being not only bigger but also in the form of a stepped pyramid, a shape that invokes a vast collection of coincidences. True, pyramids are the most basic form of construction, and anyone trying to make up some loose stone or sand building will eventually end up with a pyramid-shaped mound. However, we cannot unsee this same particular type of dry stone stepped pyramid appearing in places like nearby Sicily, where they are called muraggi and said to be a new invention. Sardinia, where the local pyramid is said to be the oldest construction in the island and is unlikely all the other amazing nuragic stuff made over there. Also Menorca, where the stepped pyramid is said to be younger than the prolific Talayot culture of the Balearic Islands, another Cyclopean culture established in one island. Not in the Mediterranean, but also not too far in the Canary Islands, there are some pyramids, too old to be dated, as they were already there when the first navigators arrived. Unfortunately, these stepped, loose stone pyramids from a bunch of islands relatively close by are treated as just another coincidence by academics. But what is not a coincidence for those guys? Not far, there is a creepy coincidence in the island of Ustica, in between Sicily and Sardinia. Those coincidences are said to be stone graves dug onto the rock, which is a bizarre choice for the disposal of dead bodies, for more than one reason. Firstly, because digging a grave on stone would take more time to complete than the body takes to rot. Furthermore, even if the hole was dug in time, the bedrock would not help with decomposing the dead bodies, making the stench not only unbearable but actually a health hazard for the people living nearby. These problems could be solved if the rock-cut graves were not intended for dead bodies but for old relics. Either way, rock-cut graves are an unlikely thing to dig, and if they appear more than once, it should not be seen as just another coincidence. Precisely, the images being shown now are not from Ustica, they are from Portugal, where these rock-cut graves are unsettlingly common, and the phenomena goes beyond Iberia. There are also a few of those coincidences as far as England, and in the regional spread that does not make sense. Also not making sense is that most of these things are said to be early Christian, from the 10th century AD. However, Iberia was at that time occupied by Muslims, so a Christian and dangerous tradition of exposing dead bodies would not be welcomed by the Islamic rulers. Maybe I'll have to do a full video about it. What do you think? Either older or harder to date are the stuff found under the sea nearby. Pantelleria is at the extreme of a shallow seabed called, conveniently, the Old Pantelleria Bank, that around the year 9000 BC was still above water and linking the islands of Pantelleria and Sicily. In that area, luckily, some underwater archaeology has yielded one of the most exciting results in recent times. There is a man-made megalith or a fallen menhir, and probably a stone-cut wall nearby. However, we should remember that, officially, there is no basis for all the dozens of myths regarding sudden and catastrophic floods deep in antiquity. They're all fantasies, even if just in the Mediterranean a handful of myth-worthy floods have been recorded. Take note. There's the Younger Dryas impact from 12,000 BC, the Pantelleria Old Bank flood from 7,000 BC, filling the Black Sea in 5,500, Burkle crater, a comet impact in 4000 BC, eruption of the Santorini volcano in 1600 BC. So that we have so many myths about floods and so many occasions where the Mediterranean Sea had too much water moving inland, that has to be a coincidence, right? Here's the thing. You know what the official version is. All this stuff is nothing more than a bunch of coincident coincidences. The floods, the pyramids, the rock-carved graves, the islands, the Iberian language, the Cyclopean walls, the Pelasgian, the Cyclops, or even, as we've seen in previous videos, the snakes or the Sibyls. They are all nothing but vulgar, everyday coincidences. Any well-educated person can see the plain coincidences, and only some out-of-control conspiracy or coincidence theorist would waste time linking these very normal events one to another. In fact, just to be sure we keep in line with the coincidence dogma, we must also say the Cyclopean walls are built with fitting stone shapes due to another coincidence. Not joking, it's an actual academic theory that the stones in polygonal masonry were already found, by coincidence, in compatible shapes. And the builders were piling them up like that just to save time. In conclusion, beyond these nagging coincidences, there is no basis to say the Cyclopean culture of the Bronze Age would stretch across the Mediterranean Sea and beyond, including the smallest islands like Pantelleria, spreading their interlocking shaped stones and other quirky cultural oddities everywhere they set ashore. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. See you soon.